For more than 1,000 years, this city had never fallen, until one morning changed history forever.
Imagine standing before a city that had survived for more than 1,000 years, a city protected by towering walls, surrounded by water, and believed by many to be impossible to conquer. Behind me stands the ancient walls of Constantinople, one of the greatest defensive systems of the medieval world. Yet, on the morning of May 29, 1453, those walls were finally breached, and the city fell. Just a short distance from here is the Panorama 1453 Museum, where the final battle for Constantinople is brought back to life. Let's back to the last days of the Byzantine Empire and discover how one siege changed history forever.
There was a time when these walls seemed impossible to penetrate. For centuries, they stood between Constantinople and its enemies, and some of the most powerful armies in history failed to get through them. Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, one of the wealthiest and most important cities in the world. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled a vital crossroads between Europe and Asia. But its greatest strength was its defenses. The massive Theodosian Walls were among the strongest fortifications ever built. For centuries, they stopped invaders, Persians, Arab armies, Bulgars, early Russian armies, even earlier Ottoman sultans, and countless others. The city survived them all. By the 15th century, many believed Constantinople was unconquerable. And yet, in the year 1453, a young Ottoman ruler believed otherwise. His name was Mehmed II. History would remember him as Mehmed the Conqueror. Mehmed was only 21 years old when he launched his campaign against Constantinople. How do you conquer a city that had defeated nearly every enemy it had ever faced? How do you break through walls that had protected an empire for nearly 1,000 years? Was it the giant cannons? Was it the size of the Ottoman army? That seems like the obvious answer. But history tells a different story, because the event that changed the course of the siege did not happen at the walls at all. It happened somewhere else. A move so unexpected that it changed the course of the siege almost overnight. But before we reveal that moment, we need to understand how the siege began. One of Mehmed's first moves was to secure control of the Bosphorus. On the European side of the strait, he ordered the construction of a powerful fortress, Rumeli Hisar. Built in just a few months, it allowed the Ottomans to control traffic through the Bosphorus and further isolate the city. Then came the cannons. Among them were some of the largest siege guns the world had ever seen. Massive bombards capable of hurling enormous stone projectiles against the ancient walls. This siege would not resemble those of the past. By the spring of 1453, preparations were complete. The Ottoman army advanced toward Constantinople, the city prepared for war. Emperor Constantine XI, the last ruler of the Byzantine Empire, knew what was coming. On April 6, 1453, the siege began. Ottoman cannons opened fire. The ancient walls shook beneath the bombardment. Day after day, the attacks continued, yet Constantinople refused to fall. Every breach was repaired. Every assault was resisted. The city was still standing, but somewhere beyond the walls, a plan was already taking shape, a plan that would soon change everything.
But the fate of Constantinople may have changed right here. Behind me lies the Golden Horn, a natural harbor that protected Constantinople for centuries. The Byzantines believed this waterway was secure. A massive iron cage stretched across its entrance, preventing enemy fleets from entering the harbor. For weeks, Ottoman Navy was unable to break through.
The Ottoman army had surrounded Constantinople, yet victory remained out of reach. The great chain across the entrance to the Golden Horn still blocked the Ottoman fleet. Then one morning, everything changed. As the defenders looked toward the Golden Horn, they saw something impossible. Ottoman ships inside the harbor. The chain still stood. It had not been broken, yet somehow dozens of Ottoman vessels had appeared beyond it. The protected waters of the Golden Horn had been breached. A new front had suddenly opened. The city could now be threatened from a direction once considered safe. For the defenders, the shock was enormous. How had Mehmed done it? The answer was one of the most daring military operations of the medieval world. During the night, while the defenders watched the walls and the harbor entrance, Ottoman forces had been working elsewhere, far from the chain, far from the sea. Wooden tracks were prepared. The ground was greased. Teams of men and animals worked through the darkness. Ship after ship was pulled over the hills north of Galata, not around the chain, but across the land itself. Mehmed's ships had done more than bypass the chain. They had opened a new front, threatened the city's less heavily fortified seawalls, and dealt a serious blow to the defenders' confidence. For Mehmed, it was a major victory, but the siege was not over. Yet, with Ottoman ships now inside the Golden Horn, the balance of the siege had begun to change. The pressure came from more than one direction. Ottoman engineers also attempted to reach the city through underground tunnels. But Byzantine defenders discovered several of them and fought a hidden battle beneath the walls. For weeks, a hidden battle continued beneath the city, while the struggle above the walls never ceased. The final battle was still to come. Yet with each passing day, the situation became more desperate. The pressure continued to grow. Day after day, night after night, the ancient walls that had protected emperors for centuries were beginning to show their age. Every day exhausted the defenders a little more. Inside the city, supplies were running low. Hope was fading, but surrender was never considered. For Emperor Constantine XI, there was only one choice: to fight. By late May, both sides understood that the siege was approaching its climax. Mehmed knew that a prolonged siege carried risks: disease, supply shortages, and the possibility of foreign intervention. He needed a decisive victory, and so preparations began for one final assault, the largest attack of the entire campaign, an attack that would decide the fate of Constantinople once and for all. On the evening of May 28, 1453, an unusual silence settled over the city. After weeks of bombardment, many sensed that the end was near. Churches filled with worshippers as citizens, soldiers, nobles, and clergy gathered together, perhaps for the last time. Emperor Constantine himself joined the ceremonies, a ruler who knew that by the next sunrise, everything could be lost. Outside the walls, the Ottoman camp was preparing as well. Thousands of soldiers readied their weapons. Commanders organized their units. Cannons were prepared for the final assault. The final attack was approaching. Before dawn on May 29th, the assault began. The darkness erupted with noise. Cannons thundered and war cries filled the air. Wave after wave of Ottoman troops advanced toward the walls. The defenders fought desperately. Arrows flew, steel clashed against steel. The battle raged across the fortifications of Constantinople. For hours, the outcome remained uncertain, yet the defenders continued to resist. But this time was different. Weeks of bombardment had weakened the defenses. The defenders were exhausted after nearly 2 months of fighting. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Then came the breakthrough. Ottoman forces succeeded in breaking through parts of the defenses. The walls that had stopped generations of invaders could no longer keep the attackers out. Fighting spread beyond the fortifications and into the city itself. The final chapter of the Byzantine Empire had begun. Somewhere amid the chaos, Emperor Constantine XI entered the battle. According to tradition, he removed the symbols of his imperial rank and chose to fight alongside his soldiers, not as an emperor, but as a defender of his city. He disappeared during the fighting and was never identified with certainty. With his death, the last Byzantine emperor was gone, and an empire that had endured for nearly 1,000 years came to an end. As the sun rose over Constantinople, Ottoman banners appeared within the city. The siege was over. The city had fallen. When the fighting finally ended, Mehmed had accomplished what generations before him could not. He had conquered Constantinople. The city he captured would become the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Over the centuries that followed, it grew into one of the world's most important cities, a bridge between continents, a meeting point of cultures. The city that had once been Constantinople gradually became what we know today as Istanbul. Yet the significance of the conquest extended far beyond the city itself. News of Constantinople's fall spread rapidly across Europe. Many were shocked. For centuries, the city had seemed permanent. Now, one of the great powers of the medieval world was gone. At the same time, Byzantine scholars carried ancient knowledge westward. The Renaissance had already begun, but the fall of Constantinople helped accelerate the exchange of ideas that would transform Europe. The conquest also encouraged the search for new trade routes beyond Ottoman-controlled territories. In the decades that followed, exploration expanded and the world became more connected in ways few people could have imagined. The events of 1453 helped shape the course of global history. Today, the walls still stand. The Golden Horn still reflects the sky, and millions of people walk the streets of a city built upon layer after layer of history. More than 5.5 centuries have passed since the conquest, yet the story still fascinates us. Perhaps because it is not simply the story of a battle, or a city, or an empire. It is the story of vision, determination, innovation, and a single decision that changed the fate of the world. The walls of Constantinople were not overcome by strength alone. They were overcome by persistence, innovation, and determination. And perhaps that is the most remarkable lesson of all.